That's a pleasure to welcome you here. The idea of this roundtable is to gather many stakeholders of the International Geneva about topics of actuality taken in the news, and this the topic today is how to. Je sais pas pourquoi je parle anglais en fait. How to put an end to the violence against the women. And I will follow in English, but I don't know why I speak English. Alors merci encore d'être là pour effectivement cette table ronde. Je remercie aussi Luisa qui va la modérer. Effectivement, c'est elle aussi qui nous a aidé à préparer, qui collabore à la réalisation de ces tables rondes. Alors je tiens, mais en nom du Club de la Presse, à remercier nos participants, M. Chungong, l'ambassadrice d'Afghanistan, Mme Suraya Dalil. Maybe it's why, because I spoke English with you, yes. Yeah. So, et Antonella Notari-Vischer, qu'on connaît bien, puisqu'elle travaille longtemps au CICR, et qui est maintenant directrice de Womanity Foundation. Alors, je vais vous demander de signer notre petit livre d'or. Lisa, je te laisse faire passer, ou si tu veux. Je remets le petit souvenir, voilà. That's the catalogue of the Cartooning for Peace exhibition, voilà, qui vient de sortir. Et puis, je laisse la parole à Luisa.
Merci Guy, mesdames et messieurs. Bonjour, merci d'être parmi nous aujourd'hui. Je donne aussi la bienvenue aux personnes qui nous suivent sur le live streaming grâce à Tobias. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your presence today. It's a pleasure to have you here. You may speak, you can speak in English or in French, and we will also take questions both in English and French. I would like to ask the Secretary General of the IPU, Interparliamentary Union, Mr. Martin Chungong, to start with his view, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Luisa, do I understand that I have 7 minutes?
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you very much for inviting me to this event. We really appreciate it as an organization that is responsible for mobilizing parliaments around global issues. This is a good opportunity for us to interact with you all, to highlight the negative effects of a phenomenon that has become worldwide in proportion, and that is violence against women. And we come to this from the point of view that parliamentarians are intended to protect and defend the rights of all human beings on their territory of jurisdiction. And human beings, when we talk of human beings, we include women, the important component of society. And when we look at the issue of violence against women, I believe that we want to look at it from a holistic angle, that there are various forms of violence against women. I have said that it has become a global scourge, and we at the IPU think that it is important to address this globally in cooperation with various partners that are out there, and I'm pleased to have some of those partners here on this panel. And you look at the statistics that have been produced by the World Health Organization or the United Nations Office of Drug and Crime, and they're very telling that you have some 35% of women who have experienced violence in one way or the other, physical or sexual, from their intimate partners. You have some 700 million women and girls out there who have been subjected to female genital mutilation, and they're living with the harmful effects of this negative tradition. And we are told that some 43,000 women are out there who are killed each year in one way or the other by their partners or family. So it is a phenomenon that we have to take into account in devising policies. And what do we do at the IPU? As the organization, the umbrella organization that brings together parliaments from all over the world, we are looking at legislative action. And first and foremost, we think that it is important to look at the legislative framework, the legal framework that is out there, and make sure that the legal framework is conducive to fighting violence against women. Parliamentarians in most jurisdictions have the power to make laws, to adapt laws, to reform laws, repeal laws, and it is important that they use these powers to come up with comprehensive legislative frameworks and policies that protect women against violence in any form that is out there. For instance, you want to look at how you improve upon the safety of victims, how you improve upon accountability of the perpetrators of violence against women, and all of that. That has to be very clear. And then also we realize that gender inequality itself, discrimination against women, is also at the root cause of violence against women. And so it is important that legislation redress the situation, look at how we can promote equality between the two sexes. So we have the first aspect then, that is improving upon legislation, the legislative framework that exists out there. Then we also want to look at implementation, because sometimes you have the legislation but nobody looks at enforcing this legislation, or they do it in a very lax manner. It is important that parliaments are more robust in ensuring that legislation that has been put in place is actually being implemented, and that perpetrators, wherever they are found guilty, are actually punished. And when we look at this, we have at the IPU been trying to help a number of parliaments to address this situation of enforcement. For instance, in Bangladesh, we're working with the Bangladesh Parliament, reaching out to them, doing training and advocacy so that they can contribute to fighting what we all know as child marriage or early marriage, which is very rife in that country and is considered to be a major source of public health concern for the country. In Sierra Leone, we are doing training for members of parliament to fight violence against women, but also to fight discrimination against survivors of the recent epidemic Ebola in the region. Similarly, with Mali, we are reaching out to the parliamentarians to work with them to fight female genital mutilation, which is something that is happening in this area. When we're coming to this press conference, Luisa asked me, she said somebody had asked whether I was going to talk about political violence against women, and I said yes, and to condemn this, because in any case, violence in any form, it has to be condemned. And we are finding that there is an increasing emergence of a new form of violence, political harassment, sexism in politics. As women gain prominence in political life, they are subject to various forms of harassment that we have to take into consideration when we try to fight violence against women. And this is a phenomenon that is not specific to any region. It is broadly spaced in, throughout the world. You have cases in the United Kingdom, US. There's even, I think, a couple of days ago we had a situation, I think it was in the Israeli parliament, where one woman was actually assaulted in parliament. And so it is something that we need to put on our radar screens and make sure that work is being done to combat this. And at the level of the IPU, we have done research on it, and we're going to publish the findings of this research in October. We're going to issue a strong policy statement to draw attention to this pernicious form of violence against women, which we think is very important. Some countries, we have some good practices out there. For example, in Bolivia, the parliament has passed a law where it is now criminalizing political violence against women, harassment against women. Mexico has done the same, and Canada. And we need to encourage all of them to continue to work in this direction, to come up with legislation that is comprehensive and broad enough to cover all forms of violence. And lastly, I want to make a case for the alliance that we have to forge between men and women in this endeavor. It is, I always tell people that it is not a woman's problem. It is a gender problem. And when you talk about gender, it is not women only, it is men and women. So we need to forge an alliance between men and women to contribute to this effort to combat violence against women. And that is why, as Secretary General for this global organization of parliaments, I'm pleased to be part of the Gender Champions Initiative here in Geneva to work with my colleagues. I have Madam Ambassador of Afghanistan sitting to my left here, who is a strong supporter of that initiative. So we need a coalition of both men and women to combat this scourge that is the subject of concern today for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary General. May I ask you, Madam Ambassador, to take the floor, please?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, thank you for the invitation, and thank you for the opportunity to bring us all to discuss the violence against women and how to end violence against women. It's an important subject for all of us, whether we are in Afghanistan, or in that part of the region, or in many other places in the world. I think the violence against women, when we look at it at a country, or in a country like Afghanistan, it has lots of dimensions that created violence against women, or it drives violence against women. There are structural issues that includes law, as my colleague said, the legislation, the law, how much law, including the constitution, enhance women's and empower women as citizens in the country and in the states. Other laws within the country, whether they are with regards to economic participation, whether they are with regards to access to property, to employment, to labor, when it comes to girls and women, access to education, access to healthcare, and political participation, following the Constitution, are also issues that influence violence against women or efforts to address violence against women. And also the law enforcement, which is an important issue, especially in our part of the world. We have laws, we have constitution, but then law enforcement on a consistent manner, on a justice basis and gender equality basis is an issue. Following that is social dimension of the violence against women. Here comes beliefs, values of the society, and also other issues that influence to frame belief system and value systems. With example, education, how education system is set up, how much girls and women have access to education, and that includes primary education, secondary education, and higher education. And also within the belief system and value system, there's also an element of tradition. And very importantly, within the society, at the household level, at the community level, and at the society level, how the power structure is in the given country. And the third dimension with regards to violence against women is economical dimension. How much contribution women do make to the economy is an important issue. Women who have a voice, they're usually women who have some economical contribution and have some income that they make, and that brings power with it. When we tackle violence against women, whether we are looking at it from a causal analysis or we are trying to form strategies to address it, we should also consider the the life cycle of violence against women. The violence against women is usually built around a cycle, which is a life cycle, and I will give you example of my country. Violence against girls, for example, in several cases starts when the mother is pregnant. Usually when mother is pregnant, they wish that the baby is a boy baby, or the sex of the baby is male. So usually the whole attitude of violence or that perception starts at the even pre-birth time. Following that, in many countries in our part of the world, the birth of a girl is not a subject for celebration, whereas a birth of a boy is a subject for celebration. We have also seen a number of countries where induced abortion is high when parents know that the child is a girl, or the baby and the infant is a girl, compared to those that are boy. With regards to the childhood, at least in my country, we do not see a lot of differences in terms of immunization coverage or essential health care. Across children, whether they are girls or boys, access to child health care, access to vaccination, to good nutrition is an issue whether it's a girl or it's a boy. However, when the child becomes 6 years of age and it's time to enroll to primary education, then it becomes an issue. And usually girls are forbidden to go to school or to enroll to primary school. Those girls that are enrolled in primary school, the chance for them to continue their education into higher education, to finish the school and to enroll into higher education is also less. At the age of adolescence, then there are a number of issues, especially for girls. The nutrition becomes an issue, especially micronutrient deficiencies. Reproductive health education is an issue. Later on, at the age of when the girl grown up and become an adult, then the issues related to reproductive health and maternal health becomes prominent. Maternal mortality is an issue in many countries around the world. Women dying from pregnancy and childbirth is an issue. Access to obstetric care, access to emergency obstetric care is an issue for many of them. And so on. So this is how the cycle is. What to do, if I should continue and to talk about what to do, I think then we need to address all those different layers that influence violence against women. We have to tackle law, we have to look at legislations and law enforcement and good governance. We have to look at social beliefs, we have to look at social structures and how the power is distributed within the social structure. And we have to also look at issues related to access to services, but also access to market, access to economic opportunities, access to employment, and access to political participation. So this is, I think I will stop here.
Thank you very much, Madam Ambassador. I'm sure that you will be able to elaborate on that with the questions. I now give the floor to Mrs. Antonella Notari-Vischer, the Director of the Womanity Foundation.
Thank you very much for inviting me. And I think it's great that we have a table where we have a representation across the board from the political sphere, including also a kind of a geographical wide representation. And a lot of the things that I would have wanted to say have already been mentioned, and I think it'd be interesting to discuss them later. But I want to add a perspective from the civil society, if you like. I am the director of a philanthropic foundation, and we invest a lot in programs that prevent violence against women, that tackle violence against women. Just though to start with a reminder of what we've already said, of the dimension of this problem. I think it needs to sink in that this is something of a global disaster. Women aged 15 to 44 today in the world are more at risk from rape or domestic violence than they are from cancer, malaria, motor accidents, or war. There is, as we said already, there are studies, very credible studies, led by, for example, the Institute for Tropical Diseases in London, that show that 1 in 3 women in the world suffer of some kind of abuse and violence in their lifetime. And that's today, that's everywhere, and that is independent of wealth, of education, of social status, of north or south or east or west. It's a phenomenon that cuts across all these different areas. So it's an extremely preoccupying and important problem to address. Most of the violence suffered by women is suffered at the hands of somebody she knows. It will be somebody from her family, a work colleague, a friend of the family. It will be somebody that she knows. And this is also important to underline because it makes it even more difficult many times for the woman or the girl to report on the violence that she suffered. And I think that's also something we need to take into account, is that we probably are even under-reporting on the dimension of the violence that is suffered by women and girls. I just wanted to remind the definition of violence against women given by the UN is any act of gender-based violence that results in or is likely to result in physical, sexual, or mental harm or suffering to women, including threats of such acts, coercion, arbitrary deprivation of liberty, whether occurring in public or in private. So, as you see, the definition given by the UN of violence against women is extremely large because it covers not necessarily even the actual acts, but even the intention and the threats of these acts. And it covers acts that are physical, but that are also psychological or emotional abuse. A very large definition of violence against women. I think that's important to consider when we talk about what was already mentioned, the legal frameworks that we're trying to set up in the countries. What do you put in a law that wants to fight against violence against women, that wants to prevent violence against women? And if you go back to the UN definition, the law has to be fairly clear and fairly specific and fairly wide to cover these different acts. Many countries in the world today do not criminalize domestic violence. A woman that is abused by her husband, whether it is through marital rape or beating, in some countries, if she cannot report it because there is no law that actually forbids the husband to rape or abuse her. So we're talking very concretely on how do you define this violence and how do you then also legislate about it. And then, of course, as was mentioned also, how do you implement it? It is today a huge problem, even in countries that have laws, even in Switzerland, for girls and women to report violence that they have suffered, rape or sexual assault or sexual harassment or other forms of violence. One, because sometimes, and this is the case in Switzerland, the actual punishment for sexual abuse is very minor. It's very low. And for the girl or the woman to decide to go to that whole procedure, which is extremely painful for a woman and very humiliating at times, because she needs to get medical examinations, she needs to be interrogated, she needs to bear witness, she needs to tell the story, she will weigh it against what benefit does she actually gain from it. And if she feels that, in the end, there is not much of a gain from it, she will probably refrain from actually testifying about the abuse. We know that in many cases for women, they actually self-accuse themselves. Did I behave badly? Did I drink too much? Did I wear the wrong clothes? Was I giving the wrong signals? Is it my fault? Is it my fault? All the time this comes back when a woman is actually considering what she's just gone through in a case of sexual harassment and sexual assault. So that also leads us to also a dimension that was already mentioned, is we need to educate And the education starts, of course, in the family and how we raise our children, what we tell the boys and girls about how they behave. It is taken up in the schools, and we need to talk about these things in schoolrooms, about what is violence against women, what is abuse. It starts with words, right? Words can be very abusive, very destructive, and we know that. There are words that can lead to deep suffering. And I'd like to add here a dimension that is quite new, not very new, but quite new, and growing, alarmingly growing, is the online abuse and violence against women. And how do you use social media that are so readily accessible? When you take pictures of a girl when she's naked or when she's in a bad situation. We've heard of cases where boys run after a girl in the street and pull off her skirt and then film her and post it on Facebook. It leads to extreme suffering for the victim of such abuse, even if it's in the virtual world, because what we believe is actually the virtual world is becoming much more more and more a part of the real world and of the real experience of the person, and that the virtual reality is amplifying the problems that we're seeing in the real reality, if you like. So education certainly is a great part of it. It's also in this whole package of education, we would include how do you train people who have to deal with victims of violence? How do you train policemen and women? How do you train social workers? How do you train nurses, doctors, people who receive the victims in the hospitals? What do you tell teachers of how to deal with these cases? How do you prepare sports coaches and people who are responsible for children in their free time, and so forth? So there's a whole wide spectrum of people who need that kind of education. And just to close on that, I think Madame Ambassador spoke of that very rightly, and it's a huge subject, of course, which we won't be able to cover completely, but how important it is to actually work on the social norms that kind of build the basis for abuse. And when we talk about that, we talk about how do you define masculinity. We've been working with a program that started in Brazil and has now spread to various countries around the world, and that we are now helping to develop in Lebanon for the first time in the Middle East. And this program is a program led by Promundo, and I know the people in the room from White Ribbon know Promundo very well, the Men Engage Alliance. It's talking to boys about their masculinity. How do you build your masculinity? If your masculinity is built on parameters where they're telling you you have to be violent, you have to be strong, you have to impose yourself to be a man, you have to be the guy that is stronger than everybody else, you're building for the boy a definition as a man that has to be violent to actually be a man. But if you start building the masculinity on parameters where a real man is somebody who cares for others, who looks out for others, who protects others, who is generous, who is giving of himself, which is an incredibly valuable image for a man, if you build your masculinity on those parameters, you're actually changing the behavior of boys and men towards women and girls. And this is an extremely successful program. It's so successful that in Brazil it has been included in the school curricula for boys and girls, actually. And this is my last word, and then I know I need to leave the floor. Sorry about that. And I just want to come back to this whole dimension of online violence, because 2 weeks ago, we just gave the second Womanity Award to prevent violence against women, and we gave it to a campaign which is called Take Back the Tech. And this campaign has been developed started by a South African organization, and is now spreading, I think it's already present in about 25 countries, and we're taking it with the help of other organizations to Mexico, Mexico being one of the most violent countries for women. There's a real femicide of women in Mexico. And together with some local organizations in Mexico, the aim is to train women to be safe online. And not only to be safe online, but to actually take over some space online again, to be able to talk to make their points of view known, to be present online, and not to withdraw. Because women are, I had that figure out, women are 27 times more likely to be abused online than men are. So what the reaction of the woman often will be is she will withdraw. But no, we need to be in that space as well. It's a very important space. And so we're working with organizations now to make sure they're safe online and that they're even active and present online. So I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Notari. If I may, I will ask the first question and then I will give you the floor, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Secretary General, do you think that there is today a political willingness at all levels, parliamentary level, governmental level, to really fight violence against women? And what do you think of what happened in some parliaments, and the fact that, for instance, in France, you have 17 former ministers who signed a petition, saying "Nous ne voulons plus nous taire." Do you think that it's helpful? Because we have the impression sometimes that there is a kind of complaisance towards sexual abuses against women. Do you have this sensation that today there is a real intention to fight at political level?
Yeah, well, I can say, at least speaking for the parliamentary community, that yes, there is. And we have been mobilizing that commitment on the part of parliaments politically to fight violence against women. And our program on violence against women is one of the vibrant programs in the IPU. So yes, there is political will at the level of parliaments to fight this. When it comes to what is happening in certain countries, and I think Antonella's referred to the fact that there has been the reluctance by the victims to come out and report cases of abuse because of the stigmatization that goes with it and the humiliation and all like. And the fact that these French MPs are coming out is a good thing. It's high time we start naming and shaming because some people hide behind traditional beliefs and culture to commit acts of violence against women. I don't see any human norm in this world that would justify honor killings, for instance, in Pakistan, that we see every day in the media. So there is, on the one hand, the political will, but there's also the need to carry out advocacy and reach out to those people who are reluctant to jump on the boat of efforts to fight against VAW. And I say I can speak for the parliamentary community that we are firmly committed to pursuing efforts in this direction.
Thank you, Mr. Chungong. The floor is yours, ladies and gentlemen. If you want to ask a question, please identify yourself. You can ask questions both, as I said, in French and in English. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I have a complex of, it's one question, but it has many things. Souvent, I would like to know if there is some research of what is the percentage of the type of men that abuse women. For instance, I read a lot, and from some experience in society here in Switzerland, some of them are pervert narcissists. And I think the danger in that is not only that the woman is abused, but the influence of that father on the children, whether they are small or older. And when the woman, some of the women do not survive, I mean, not only die, but survive psychologically with self-esteem. When they go out of this, it's a via dolorosa, but then comes the point that they understand that the girls who are university graduates, that the women fought for the education, etc., are still sympathize with the father and hold the mother as a victim. I hear this story again and again. My point is, how do you recommend? Is there a point where we can break that wall of the younger generation and the society? I find that women are brave. We can do that via dolorosa, and sometimes pervert narcissists become more hostile when the woman leaves them, when the victim leaves. And it is nothing, I don't say nothing, but it's not always in poor countries, in developing countries. How do you recommend, what can be done to help break to help that wall of society and our own children who refuse, who always keep seeing the woman, she merits it. She did something, because they get brainwashed by those men that all their lives as children at home, that you see, she's hysteric, she is this, she is that. And
I think, yeah.
Comme ça? Okay. I read that in France there's already a change in the law that a woman can sue a person, a violent husband or spouse, even after 20, 30 years. Is there some chance that it will come to be the reality in Switzerland? Yeah, and there's so much work to do, but not only with the abuser, but the families and the society. What can you?
Should I go first? I think you touched on a lot of things, and we would have days of discussions around these issues. I think one important point that you made is, indeed, domestic violence does not affect only the woman. It also very often affects the children, and very much so, because they are testifying this. There's a whole consequence. They can be victims of violence themselves. Often the women will put themselves between the man and the child to defend the child, but often the child also suffers abuse. I would not make a general statement. I don't know that there are studies that would say that, but I don't think anybody is making a general profiling of who can be an abuser. And obviously there are people who have mental or psychological problems that make them unstable and abusive and violent. But I don't think we should think that automatically somebody who is violent is necessarily ill. That's why all three of us really spoke of one fundamental thing, is the law and the accountability to the law and the legal framework. Because if you start looking at, okay, is this person sane or insane or so forth, and you try and define it that way, it's not going to help you deal with it. And the law just says, beating, raping, abusing a child or a woman or a man, for that matter, is illegal. And if you do it, you're accountable to, and so forth. It says it in different ways in different countries, but I think that's the best framework. Obviously, there's a lot of work that needs to be done in an abusive family or in a family that has gone through abuse, on the psychological, on the whole aspect of how do you heal from that? How does every member of the family, how does the abuser heal if he wants to and if he's ready to? How do the children who have testified it? The other big question you touched on is the question of women as victims or women as agents. And yes, I think there is still a big perception from the women themselves, but also from those around them, that when something happens to them, it's their fault. We see this in conversations. We have launched some conversations, for example, on social media on sexual harassment, for example, in Egypt. It's a huge phenomenon in Egypt, in the streets of Cairo today. No women, even dressed extremely conservatively, is safe from being touched or verbally abused, sexually assaulted, and so forth. So we had this conversation online, and there were a lot of voices that said, well, it's the fault of the women. They shouldn't be out there on their own. They shouldn't be wearing like this. They shouldn't be walking in the street. What are they doing? And so forth. And no, we need to resist that. We need to resist that, and we need to change the mindsets, as Madame l'Ambassadeur also said, of the people. No, a woman has a freedom, a right, what am I saying? Liberté de mouvement, the freedom of movement. Yes. Non, mais j'ai peur que Madame l'Ambassadrice ne comprenne pas. J'aimerais quand même. Mais we need to work on women being more affirmative of their rights and of their space. And that's all I can say, I think, at this point, because it's a very huge debate and discussion.
Madam Ambassador, would you like to add something?
Yes. I think it's a very important yet very complex discussion, because there's a lot of factors into this discussion. I read a quote that I read it somewhere, I don't remember who said it. It says that the best lesson you can give to your children is to be kind with your mother. It's the best lesson that you can give to your children is to be kind with your mother, in terms of the best inspiration, the best model that you can be to your children with regards to being kind and being gender sensitive is to be kind with their mother. I think it's the household dimension is very important, how they relate with each other, how we educate our girls and boys, son and daughter at the very early age, how they do at the family. That is very important, and that's where a lot of values and beliefs takes form. One of the things that Mr. Secretary General mentioned was it's not a woman problem. It's the society problem. It's a justice problem. It's an equality problem. And I think that has to be get into the grassroots, and to say that when we talk about women who has been affected, who has been, whose right has been violated, it's not about, yes, it's about her, but it's about justice in the society. It's about equality, but it's about prosperity to all of us. And that's a change in the mindset, that's a change in the perspective. That you cannot have a society that is justified, a society that's prosperous, where women are ignored, where women are subject to violence. I think that, at least in my country, that has been a challenge, because we usually see that women, this is their problem, this is their fault, this is their domain, and they have to behave on certain ways. And if they are subject to this behavior, then it's their fault. And this is a change in the mindset. I think it's not only about violence against women. In many aspects, or in few other aspects, it's also the same. For example, when you have recruitment, when you have vacancies for women, usually men are very good in applying and feeling that they are qualified for those positions. But when it comes to women, many women, although they have right qualifications, they don't think that they are qualified to apply. It's also self-confidence. It's the trust that we are grown up with through our life. And women in many parts of the world, especially in my part of the world, in least developed countries, in countries where there's poverty, there's conflict, there's illiteracy, then this level of self-confidence among women is very low.
Mr. Secretary General, would you like to add something on that? And just to follow up on the question of Madam, you spoke about the fact that you are a champion together with other gentlemen, of this cause of women. Do you think that people like football players or actors or other role model for the young people could be really important, and that it is important for them to speak against violence? Especially now that the Euro is starting, and I know that you like football very much. Do you think that those football players could play a role on that?
Yeah, you use the right word, role model. Many kids look up to the stars, the football stars, the film stars, tennis stars, and they could do nothing wrong. So one small step by a star will go a long way in building a culture of nonviolence in this particular instance. So I agree with you that the stars should, or prominent people should be used to champion the cause. And it's for good reason that we see that many organizations are appointing goodwill ambassadors, high-profile personalities in society to champion this cause. It is something that we need to encourage very much. And you asked the question about the profile of a perpetrator. One thing that we have seen is that insecurity on the part of the man is a driving factor of violence against women. And I have, unfortunately, he's deceased today, a prominent member of parliament, the speaker of Namibia, the Namibian parliament, who said that a strong man is never afraid of a strong woman. It sums it all up. It's not because you're muscular that you think you can take it out on a woman. So if we have to address violence against women, we, of course, have to put in place punitive legislation, legislation that criminalizes and actually punishes acts of violence against women. But we also have to do advocacy, education at all levels. And I think Madam Ambassador referred to beliefs, societal beliefs, traditional beliefs. We see that these beliefs are driving violence against women in many societies. You go to Mali, for instance, you cannot effectively fight female genital mutilation without talking to the traditional religious leaders in that country and having them on your side. You would put in place a good piece of legislation, but you would see that people will take their children across the border to another country to have them cut, so to speak, because they don't believe in the legislation in their own country. So education, sensitization is very important in this endeavor.
Thank you. Guy Metton, I think you have a question, and then we'll take another one.
Yes, I don't want to take the floor, but if there is no question, because I have 3 questions, maybe for every of you. No, the first one maybe to Antonella. I have the impression that the violence against the women, individual women, are pretty well documented, I think, to raping, harassment, or domestic violence. But have you the impression, not the impression like me, that there is also a growing mass violence against the women? I think, for instance, in Eastern Congo, or even in the gangs in our cities, not only in third world countries, but young gang people harassing women or girls. So is it an impression, is it right, or make you a difference between individual or domestic violence and what I call mass violence? And maybe for Mr. Chungong, you have at the IPU this ranking of the women presence in parliaments. Each year you are publishing this. So is it, there is a, what is the impression? It is improving? What is the, or could you evaluate the efficiency of this ranking, because it's also important to get many women in parliaments because they can be more aware about this kind of topics. So what is your balance after, I don't know, 20 years of publication? And maybe for Mrs. Ambassador, everybody of you can answer, but do you make the cause of this violence? Are they cultural? It's a cultural cause, or it's universal? I mean, we can get, I'm not sure it's right, the impression that there are some culture or some religion, I think to Islam because it's a hot topic now, who can give more roots to violence against the woman, or is it a universal behavior, or it is related to some cultural causes, or not, because I'm not sure we can find everywhere. But so I don't know.
Who wants to start first?
Okay, thank you, Guy. Thank you for that question, for drawing attention to this. I think I mentioned in my preliminary statement that fighting violence against women entails addressing the issue of inequality. And political inequality is one form of inequality that has to be addressed. And we've been promoting this for at least 40 years. We started doing this in the 70s. There's a strong women's lobby in the IPU. And you wanted to know what progress has been made. I would like to say that the progress that has been achieved, and there's been a lot of progress since Beijing, women's representation in parliament has doubled from a little over 10% when the Beijing Plan of Action was adopted. Today, where you have women representing about 22.3% of global parliamentary membership. And you asked about ranking. The ranking is just one part of a strategy to promote women's political representation. That is part of naming and shaming, but also encouraging emulation. When we do travel across the world, I meet leaders. When they know I'm coming, they are proud to show me this map that we do on the wall and say, look, we're here, this is our color, we're doing well. And I am keen sometimes to tell other parliaments that they're not doing well and they have to improve. So there's some spirit of emulation in this. But there are other measures that we advocate, including legislative, reforming electoral laws, instituting quotas and reserved seats for women, a gamut of this. But we do say that at the end of the day, you want to promote women of quality, not women per se. You want to promote people who can make a difference. And that's the other aspect of the coin. You have numbers, but you also have quality. When women are elected into parliament, what do you do to make sure that they improve upon parliamentary outcomes? You then work with the parliaments to make them gender sensitive, to make sure that women are put in positions where they can contribute, they can lead, and show that they make a difference. You want to build mechanisms in parliament, for example, women's caucuses, so that women can come together. And we see it's a very useful tool politically, women coming together across the political aisle, people of the opposition and the governing parties, to articulate issues that are relevant to women. And we have seen in cases where women are present in parliament that those issues that are relevant and problematic for women come to the fore, and parliaments are obliged to address them in a more or less effective manner. So it's a combination of factors, the progress that has been made. But we at the IPU are saying that since we all agree that we need parity, gender parity in political representation, then we should stick to the actual definition of parity, which is 50-50. It's not 20-80, it's not 30, as Beijing said, 30-70. It's 50-50, and that should be the target.
Culture and religion. It's very, very mixed up or misunderstood in our part of the world. There is a misperception about the religion in our part of the world. Islam is a religion of peace and solidarity, and it used to be like that. Prophet Muhammad said that seek knowledge from cradle to grave. So he guided his followers that from cradle to grave, whether you are man or woman, you seek knowledge and education. But we don't do that. Girls do not go to primary school. If they go to primary school, they don't finish the school. They drop out from the school. They don't go to higher education. They don't go to the society, etc. Or female genital mutilation, although it's not an issue in Afghanistan, we don't have it. But it is a traditional issue. It's not a religious-based practice. FGM is a traditional issue. So a lot of things that is perceived as a religion, it's largely cultural, and it's also continued for so many years and for so many decades and for so many centuries because of ignorance, because of lack of opportunities, because of access. So and so it has been embedded to be seen as religion, but many of them has a deep cultural roots. With regards, if I may also comment on the previous discussion, I think in countries like mine, First Lady play a great role to be a champion, to be an inspiring agent for others. When the First Lady comes out and she talks about anything or she addresses the public, it is a very influential champion. Maybe it's not an issue in many other countries because they have seen it so many times and they have practiced it for so many decades, but in a country like Afghanistan, the First Lady being a champion on gender equality is an important progress. Second is also media. I think media plays a very critical role, and how we put media to direct and to influence public opinion on women and on girls is very important. Usually in my country, for example, media is reporting on very, very negative and extreme cases of violence against women, but also in terms of putting in front the strategies to tackle that one, the good examples to address violence against women, how other citizens can play a role in that one. Yes, it's not only women's issues, also all of us, it's an issue for men and women, but media playing a great role in that is an important, is very important.
Okay, Guy, thanks for the question. And don't get me started because that one is a really hot one. I do definitely, and not just I believe, but we can definitely see that there are strategies that drive violence against women in a massive way, that it's actually a socio-political strategy. Just to mention, mass rapes in Bosnia-Herzegovina, so we're talking Europe, we're talking 20th century Europe, or we can go back to the Second World War and even mention that. But we can talk mass rapes in Congo. Luckily now, rape as a weapon of war is being recognized as a war crime. And why is it important? It's because rape was almost in all those countries already illegal before it was recognized as a war crime. So rape was a crime already. But it's important to qualify it as a war crime because it means it's a tactics, it's a strategy that is willfully carried out massively. And why? I mean, we can speculate on that because, and most likely because when you take possession of the body of a woman and rape her, you're actually dominating your enemy to whom she belongs. I mean, the group of whatever, the group that you're fighting against, whom she belongs, you're humiliating them. You're actually somehow also taking possession of the reproductive process. So you're sort of conquering that territory through the body of the woman. And there are a lot of strategies like that are deployed massively. So definitely violence, sexual violence and rape in wartime is, I think, a socio-political strategy and a willful strategy, and it's massive, and it's right that it be recognized as a war crime. I think something like the gender side we've seen in China with selective abortions of female fetuses, or with the killing of young baby girls, or when they let girls die from hunger and from deprivation because they don't want girls, or they didn't want girls. Apparently it's now changing slightly because they recognize the problem. That is definitely also a political strategy. I mean, it's a strategy that was yes, it wasn't targeting explicitly women because they said, let's not have girls. But they were valuing the male so much more that in the end, when you said you can only have one child, what are you doing? You're totally pointing the girl child as something you don't want, something that is going to be a problem, not an added value. It's interesting, actually, that Korea did exactly the opposite very early, because Korea started valuing women's contribution to the economy. And Madame Ambassador mentioned this point as an important point of fighting against violence against women. When the Koreans realized that having a baby girl was just as valuable as having a baby boy, because the woman could have a career, earn money, bring back money to the family, this whole phenomenon of gendercide decreased or disappeared. And so it is. Femicide in Mexico, as we said before, I do think it's also a way of fighting war against people that you want to repress, oppress, shut up, that you want to make sure you control, and therefore you attack the women and girls. And violating them is a way to take possession, take control. Yes, I do think that's definitely a strong phenomenon, and it's horrendous. And how do you fight against that? That's even a bigger dimension still. But I think again, you need the laws that punish that, and then you need the kind of advocacy, education, and resistance from the civil society, from the political powers to these kinds of strategies.
Thank you. Gilles?
Oui, Soulac, Radio Cité Genève, journaliste. Je suis un peu déçu. Parce que je me suis dit, voilà la question, que faire pour mettre fin aux violences faites aux femmes? Je me suis dit, ça y est, ils ont trouvé une solution. Ça fait 5000 ans qu'on attend, ils ont trouvé, donc j'étais content. Et puis, je vous ai écouté, et puis j'ai pas eu vraiment de réponse, parce que chaque cas est particulier, chaque pays est particulier, chaque culture, chaque religion... donc en fait, on s'en sort jamais. Donc il n'y a pas de réponse, donc on s'en sortira pas. Et puis, m'est venue, en fait, la réflexion d'un homme qui avait changé, ça finissait aussi par isme, hein, c'était comme sexisme, ça s'appelait racisme. Et lui, il avait réfléchi de différentes manières. Il a réfléchi au niveau philosophique dans toute l'histoire de l'humanité. Deuxièmement, il a réfléchi au niveau religieux, l'impact religieux qui a posé sur les femmes, parce qu'il y a quand même 500 ans, une femme qui avait un acte sexuel, c'était un péché quand même. Au niveau politique, même en Suisse, il n'y a pas très longtemps que les femmes votent, il a réfléchi au niveau économique et au niveau de l'éducation. Alors, je me demande si aujourd'hui, des exemples comme ceux-là, et ça m'est venu à l'esprit en vous écoutant, hein, mais j'ai le droit d'être déçu, hein, c'est subjectif. Je me demande si aujourd'hui, en fait, on pense, peut-être sans le charisme de certaines personnalités, je relève la question de tout à l'heure de Guy Métan, charisme de certaines personnes qui se lèvent et qui arrivent à toucher du doigt certaines réalités qui ont effleuré l'esprit pendant des siècles, parce que le racisme, bon, comparé le sexisme et le racisme, c'était pas mal comme idée. Aujourd'hui, on en sourit, ça paraît une évidence. Pour les jeunes, on n'en parle même plus. Pour nos générations encore, on y est un peu lié. Qu'est-ce qu'il va falloir faire pour que véritablement il y ait ce charisme qui ressorte un jour, parce que je crois qu'il faut ça, hein. Parce que si moi je me tourne, bon, je sais pas combien il y a de femmes ici, sur 6, je suis sûr, parce que j'ai fait le test, il y en a 4 qui ont été violentées. Donc c'est pas un sujet pas grave, c'est sérieux. Voilà, je passe une question, une remarque. Je sais pas si vous avez une réponse pour pas que je reste déçu, ce serait bien.
Je peux ajouter, je lis qu'en France, si je me rappelle bien, I read that in France by the media, a woman is killed every 3 days by violence, mostly by her spouse. And I add to that journalist, my question or my request or I have a dream that the society will be more active on the grassroots. We are talking about politicians and about laws, legislations. I would like to see more education given to the society which is not abusive, to every man and woman in the street, that when they hear about an abuse of the neighbor, they see something, they will be more active in saying so, in expressing it. There were a series in, je crois, Le Monde, in l'Express, Nouvelle Observateur, excellent series about violence. And I see a lot of advancement in the attitude in France at least, of what I read. But still, the main denominator was that the society keeps silent. And there's an excellent phrase that was repeated, and the education minister at the time said, "Les tirs qui se tait et les tirs qui tuent." And this is my feeling, that the society is too silent. Society, we cannot exclude if we are talking about the woman, the victim, the family. Where is society? Society should, again, sorry.
je ne suis pas d'accord que la société est silencieuse. Non, au contraire, on a énormément d'organisations de femmes, de hommes, de mixtes, qui sont extrêmement actifs, extrêmement vocales. Les médias en parlent. Qu'est-ce qu'aujourd'hui encore, tout ce viol horrible, atroce du Brésil, toute la plage de Ipanema ou Copacabana, je ne sais plus, est couverte de petites culottes rouges et blanches parce que la société brésilienne s'est mobilisée là contre. Quand il y avait eu ce horrible viol de cette jeune femme dans le bus indien, vous vous souvenez, les hommes sont descendus habillés en femmes dans les rues en Inde parce qu'ils ont dit on en a marre de ce genre de choses. Alors c'est clair que on pourrait toujours faire plus, on pourrait savoir plus, on pourrait éduquer plus, mais j'ai pas l'impression qu'on est en train de taire le problème. Mais alors, je suis tout à fait d'accord avec vous, monsieur, c'est pas en 1 heure au Club suisse de la presse, excuse-moi Guy, qu'on va résoudre ce problème. Ça, c'est quand même un peu utopiste de penser qu'aujourd'hui, cet après-midi, on allait arriver avec les réponses. Je pense que ce qu'on a essayé de faire, mais je ne peux pas parler à la place de monsieur et madame, mais c'est de venir avec quelques exemples et de nos expériences et de ce qu'on fait, des activités qui sont en cours et qui doivent être connues et soutenues par tout le monde. Mais c'est un problème hyper complexe et qui demande des solutions hyper complexes et multiples dans les leaders de société, que ce soit parmi les leaders religieux, politiques, dans la société civile, de l'enfance à l'âge adulte, à travers les lois et les normes culturelles. Enfin, on a essayé de donner un peu la largeur de ce spectre, de comment ça va se passer. Mais je pense que l'idée d'avoir des leaders charismatiques qui nous mènent dans ce combat, je trouve qu'elle est excellente, il faut les trouver. Ce serait bien.
Monsieur le secrétaire général, est-ce que vous voulez ajouter quelque chose pour que Gilles ne soit pas déçu? And then I will give the floor to Madame Ambassadeur.
Non, je pense qu'il faut être réaliste. C'est que nous savons que c'est un problème sérieux, pour reprendre le mot de monsieur le journaliste. Il existe, mais je pense qu'il y a des progrès qui ont été réalisés. Et selon nos recherches, la plupart des pays du monde, la grosse majorité des pays du monde se sont dotés des lois tendant à lutter contre la violence faite aux femmes. Ça, c'est clair. Mais il y a des problèmes, il y a encore des progrès à réaliser dans différents domaines, y compris l'amélioration du cadre législatif, la mise en œuvre, j'ai insisté sur la mise en œuvre effective des lois qui ont été adoptées pour combattre les violences faites aux femmes. Et on ne peut pas sous-estimer l'importance de la sensibilisation. Comme Madame l'a dit, je pense qu'il faut faire un travail de proximité au niveau local pour sensibiliser les populations quant aux méfaits de ces fléaux que sont les violences faites aux femmes. Donc c'est une action à multiples facettes qu'il faut mener pour combler ce vide-là qui existe aujourd'hui. Mais il faut reconnaître qu'il y a eu des progrès. Le fait qu'on en parle dans certaines sociétés où les traditions sont bien ancrées est un exploit en lui-même. Donc, voilà.
Je voudrais, to follow up, hein. Je parle un peu anglais. Hein. Moi, je vais prendre l'exemple d'une structure qui existe.
Say it in English, so madame.
Ok, I try.
Oh, I'm sorry, I spoke.
Appuie pas en même temps. Super, merci Luisa. Okay, I would like just to go on a local way. You know, there is an association here. The name is Ruban Blanc, white ribbon. You know, it's interesting because the last time I was making interviews with them, they told me, it's pretty hard. We don't get much sponsors, much money and everything to go on. They make 10 days between November and December of sensibilization about violence, you know. This kind of situation is a local example to say that many people, many women, in every country, you know that, it's the women that change the world, for sure. They have connection everywhere. I was in many countries for this violence. This is the women. They are very powerful. But here, for example, there is no money to make something. And we know we need, this is the problem of many people, it's just to get something to help to make something powerful in a country or in an area. So this is an example, very practically.
Madam Ambassador, would you like to add something? No? Before we take 3 last questions, let's say, can I just ask you something, Mr. Secretary General? You were speaking about Parliament, they are more sensitive today, but what about political parties? Because sometimes the problem is that the political party don't put women on top of the list during important elections, and they prefer to pay some fees instead of really play the game. So what would you advocate?
Yeah, I think that the system of naming and shaming has worked in many instances where political parties that are not towing the line, the gender equality line, are named and shamed. That's one thing. The other one is that then you raise the level of penalty against parties that are not complying with gender-sensitive legislation. So you can do that. But I think that what is happening and is becoming successful is educating political parties, getting to understand that if they are there to fight for democracy, democracy means equality between the sexes, and that it is important for them to promote men and women in political life. And we have seen in many societies that when some sort of equality or level of women's participation has been achieved in societies, they're proud of that. They want to showcase this. And so, the IPU sometimes twists some parliaments. I don't want to mention one here, but the fact that we tell them, we publish a list of delegations that come with only men or women, is embarrassing to them. And one such country has invited me to their country to say, listen, let's look at this problem. But if you don't talk about it, if you sweep it under the carpet, nothing is going to happen. So it's a combination of factors, incentives, punishment, coaxing, advocacy. We'll get there.
Thank you. 3 quick questions. 3 quick questions. Madame, Monsieur, and et toi. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm very interested in the subject, as you know, and I have a few questions, especially about creating this movement of men we are trying to do within the White Ribbon campaign in Switzerland. How to mobilize the men to take a stand, to declare positively and publicly that they are against violence against women is a daunting job. It doesn't exist. It is almost impossible to create this movement. We're working at it really, really a lot. And so I don't quite understand why the concerned men are not really going down the street and say, yes, we together want to make sure that everybody knows that we also want a world free of violence against women. So that's one of my problems. The second one is, and it goes to the Madame the Ambassadress from Afghanistan, and thank you for your presentation. There's just one question I have already for a long time, but maybe you can answer it. How come the media especially, but also in every country, including here, nobody really educates the public that the sex of a child is determined by the men? So why do we devalue women that way and the men don't know about it? When I speak about it, most say, oh, I never heard of this. Where did you pick that up? And this could be a very good media thing, and I will start putting it on Facebook as of today, okay? The second thing is, and I also have big questions, how come it is so difficult to mobilize the media for social change? We did create, all of us, not just the media, a culture of horrendous violence. Every day, my grandchildren, they look at violent games and everything. When I asked my grandchild, 11 years old, why are you looking at all this? He said, Grandma, it's exciting, it's great. And I said, don't you have any peace education in your school? No, peace is boring. So we have a huge job to do to make peace exciting, to make it interesting to create peaceful world and not sell this unbelievable, I don't know if this thing works, amount of video games and whatever children have that is just filled with violence. And then the last thing I want to share is that I go around the world whenever I have an opportunity and I speak about the 3 S's. That today our media, yes, it is pursuing the 3 S's. Nobody really always knows what this is, so I have to say it. It's sex, scandal, and too much sport. If you don't have this in your media, you won't sell it. Okay? And journalists have attacked me and they said, if we would follow your advice to shift from the 3 S's just a little bit to the 3 C's, we would make bankruptcy because we sell because of the 3 S's. But they do ask me, what are the 3 C's that you would have more in the press? They are about courage. People have enormous courage to live today in this complex world. There is a lot of creativity on so many levels, and it's not enough stressed as a positive contribution to society. And the third one is compassion or cooperation, whatever you want. The world is filled with extraordinary, compassionate acts of service and to make this world a better place. And I look...
Thank you. I think we will ask Madam Ambassador to respond.
I think you ask a lot of questions and tough questions. I try to answer them, but please help me, other panelists. I think violence against women is not a woman's issue. It's a main issue. How to engage men? We engage them right from the childhood. Their behavior with their sister at the household, their behavior with their mother, their behavior inside the house is very important. And what we teach them in the school. Yes, man is responsible for the sex of the child. But yeah, many people do not know this. And of course, in our part of the world, it's really, a lot of people do not know about it, that we do not talk about it. I think there are men who are champions in this whole women's empowerment, gender equality, and violence against women. It's not that we do not have men in that journey. When I was a child, I went to school because my parents, my father and my mother, believed in education. When I was not a child to go for early marriage when I was 14 or 15 years old, where my other fellow classmates did because of my father and because of my mother. And then I was able to go to higher education, very normal and very happily. And again, it could have been otherwise in my society, very much. And then even after my marriage, I enjoyed a lot of support from my husband, from my father, a lot. And my husband, who helped me, who empowered me to pursue my career, despite having children. I have 3 children. And to really, in a very difficult circumstances, to be able to connect with my career and to stay on. So a lot of things that we see, and we sometimes, and it's not that, I should say that it's not that I achieved those things. It was because of my father and my mother and my husband that I was able to do this one. They are not champions per se, that they're recognized champions, they are publicly recognized, but they are champions. They are silent champions, low-profile champions. And we have those examples, but those examples are not presented as such. Those examples are not, they have not received focus as such. You said it very right, to make peace exciting, to present peace as an exciting tool and game to children. We have been dominated by those violent tools and violent thinking. And we have also seen manifestation of that in the world some way, one way or another. I wish I could have answers to your questions, but I tried to answer.
Okay. Luisa?
Yes, Mr. Secretary General, please.
Thank you very much. I think very relevant questions. But I must say that there is no paucity of gender champions in Geneva. I refer to the Gender Champions Initiative in this city. Mm-hmm. Madam Ambassador is part of that network. I am a gender champion. You are. And there are many ambassadors, men ambassadors who are gender champions, men heads of international organizations in Geneva that are gender champions. And our hope is that more men will come on board. We are saying that it is a fact that most men are gender-free, not violence-free. They are not perpetrators of violence against women. But it is deplorable that most of these men who are not perpetrators are silent. They are the silent majority and want them to speak up, and it's very important. Regarding the media, I think you answered the question yourself. Now, the media has to report on what sells, what brings bread to the table. A couple of weeks ago, we were in Vienna at the European Newspaper Congress, and we had been invited with my colleague of UNOC to come and talk about constructive journalism. And the point we're making there is, yes, it is good for you to sell exciting news. It is important for the media to do what they're supposed to do, that is informing the public. But they should also complement this, supplement this with educating the public. When I look at reports of violence against women in Eastern Congo, I look at what UN peacekeeping troops are accused of having done with young children in the Central African Republic. I just see this. The news is presented in the most sensational manner, but I am hard put to find solutions being proposed, an analysis of the issue by the media, and solutions for resolving such a problem. I think then that for me, the real role of the media is, of course, to inform, but also to educate and propose solutions.
Thank you. Yes, 2 quick questions, because then we will have to close.
So part of my questions have already been answered. So I'm Daniel, I'm working for the White Ribbon as well. And I just wanted to start with something I find very important. The title, you are talking about ending violence against women, eliminating it, and I think it's very important. I would like to stress that in Switzerland, Swiss authorities, do never speak about ending violence against women because they feel like it's okay. It's not so much relevant. So they don't talk about ending it. They just talk about reducing it or preventing it. But talking about eliminating is very important. And I would like to congratulate you because the title is very important. And you have to believe in it. Then the second thing, as a young man working to engage men and boys in preventing and ending violence against women, I have not always been welcomed by women's organizations. Some of them, yes, some of them, no. I will not name them, of course, but Geneva is supposed to be one of the most progressive cities in the world. We have lots of money, lots of means to help achieve gender equality. And I feel very sorry that some actors in Geneva do not welcome men and boys as allies in ending violence against women. So for me, one of the main tools to reach that would be for women and boys, women and men, boys and girls, to feel that they could be partners. Some women feel maybe threatened because they feel like men are entering their space when they want to speak about gender equality. And at the same time, some men do not want to be involved because they feel like we want to change them. So I would just like to say that in 2016, we need much more participation and collaboration between men and women. And I think, at least in Switzerland, we are very, very far from what we need.
Thank you. Last question, Ricardo.
On va finir en français, hein, si vous permettez. Écoutez, moi je trouve que c'est un euphémisme que de parler de tradition. Et pourquoi ? La violence, en fait, elle commence par la violence des parents. Je suis du Sud, moi je suis colombien et je sais de quoi je parle, de violence. La violence commence à la maison. Elle commence souvent aussi par la mère qui tape les enfants, qui tape la fille, qui tape le garçon, et le père qui tape le garçon et qui tape la fille, et qui après, cette violence est reprise dans la société. Pourquoi ? Et pourquoi ? Parce que cette violence, elle est quasiment intériorisée, elle est quasiment, comme on l'a dit tout à l'heure, elle est justifiée par la société, et plus que ça, elle est justifiée par la non-application de la loi. Et on n'est pas obligé. Est-ce que vous avez déjà vu un pays du monde dans lequel on utilise une célébrité pour lutter contre la violence à l'égard des policiers ou pour le non-paiement des impôts? C'est pas ça seulement. C'est bien que les célébrités se joignent. J'ai beaucoup utilisé les célébrités dans des choses avec le BIT, avec le PNUD. Mais le plus grave de tout ça, c'est que les politiques, dans le sens global du terme, ne mettent pas ce phénomène en tant que priorité dans leur politique, dans le sens noble du terme. Je ne parle pas de la politique politicienne. Il n'y a pas de priorité pour ce sujet dans l'application de la loi. Est-ce que vous avez vu, on n'a pas eu besoin d'avoir Ronaldo pour que je paye une amende. Et la société civile, elle fait son travail, madame. Vous avez parlé de la société civile. Je fais partie de la société civile depuis des dizaines d'années. Mais la société civile n'a pas la responsabilité de la finalité de l'application de la loi. C'est l'État qui a l'obligation. Et donc, c'est à travers les citoyens, même les gens, que les choses pourront changer fondamentalement. Nul n'est censé ignorer la loi. Et ça s'applique dans tous les pays du monde. Moi, j'ai vécu dans des pays très, très, très pauvres où il n'y a pas du tout de violence et des pays très, très riches où il y a une violence. Donc, voilà. Je suis ambassadeur de Ruban Blanc et je reprends les termes qui ont été dits là. C'est très, très difficile pour que les politiques se mettent en avant par rapport à ça. Voilà.
Maybe this last remark is maybe for you, Mr. Chungong, how to convince the political leaders to have the fight against violence top on their priority.
Yeah, I think it's very clear. There has to be pressure. There has to be peer pressure from the other political circles. What we need to do is to highlight good practice, and there is no paucity of good practice out there, telling people why it is, and proving why it is important, and it makes sense, good political sense, practical sense, to fight violence against women internationally. And where you have done this campaign, I think that you have received a high-level political commitment, and I am pleased to say that our research shows that violence against women is climbing up in the ladder of priorities for many political leaders around the world. So there is that campaign of advocacy that you need to do, to say that it makes good business sense to fight violence against women. And we have mentioned measures that we have put in place in terms of incentives, giving award. I think this year, was it last year? No, a couple of years ago, there was an award by the World Futures Council on the best policies on fighting violence against women. So you have a combination of incentives and good practice and advocacy that you have to put in place in order to raise political commitment in countries to fight violence against women.
Thank you very much to our panelists. Thank you very much to you, ladies and gentlemen, for your presence. I think this was a very, very interesting debate. We will send you the link of the streaming so you can forward it to your people, your friends, put it on Facebook, on Twitter if you want. I would like to thank all of you, and I would like to tell you that the next debate will be on the 22nd of June regarding the participation of young people. It will be at the university together with the Club Suisse de la Presse. You will receive the invitation, and I thank you for your presence again. Thank you.